Hello, welcome to the MuseScore Café for today, Wednesday, October 31st, 2018. And this is Halloween, at least in the US. I know there's other cultures that celebrate other Day of the Dead type of holidays. And kind of in honor of that, I have chosen a piece of music I want to talk about that I wrote some time ago, actually 30 years. Wow, is that possible? 20 years. Okay, we'll say 20 something years ago. And the piece is entitled Goblin Market. And I wrote it, there's a former boss of mine when I used to work for Hewlett-Packard who also, I left HP to go do music full-time. She left HP to do storytelling full-time. And we used to do some classes and things together. And where she would teach storytelling and I would accompany with music sometimes. And she used to do every Halloween a poem by Christina Rossetti called Goblin Market that really made an impression on me, and I decided to write some music for that. And really I really just wrote a snippet of music for one particular recurring scene where the goblins have their market. And this piece has a really interesting time signature thing going on. And at the time, this was before Finale, before MuseScore, certainly. I think Finale existed, but I wasn't using it yet. I was using a program called Notator for the Atari ST. And Notator was way ahead of its time in a lot of ways. And I see every once in a while people remembering it fondly on the MuseScore forums. But its time signature facilities were not as full-featured as we might like today. So the way that I actually notated it originally was sort of using Notator was not really the way I would have envisioned it being. And in any case, I can't find that music. I can't find all I would have is like a print of what I did in Notator way back then, that would have been late 80s, early 90s. So I decided I want to try to enter this into MuseScore because it's really one of the very few of my compositions from my adult life that I haven't entered into MuseScore, and it really has some interesting challenges. So anyhow, that's what I've chosen to talk about. And also, since I've been telling the story, I would just want to tell a little more about this. I'm going to play a little of this recording. This is a recording of the piece Goblin Market from a CD I did with trumpeter Hugh Reagan. The CD was entitled Back to Saturn. So here's what the music that we're going to enter actually sounds like. So, 2, 3, 4, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, and 3, and 4, 1, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, and 2, and 3, and 4, 1. So, what hopefully you're getting from that, my conducting, is the piece is in 4/4, except every other measure is missing half a beat. And that's basically the deal. 2, 3, 4, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, 1. So that's the basic idea of the piece, alternating measures of 4 and 3.5. So the only way I was able to notate that originally was 15/8, which is what that all adds up to. If you think 4/4 plus 3.5 over 4, if you do the math on it, you end up with 15/8. That's not really what I wanted to convey. I really wanted to convey alternating measures of 4/4 and 3.5 over 4. So that is what I'm going to try to actually enter here. And the piece is actually, it's just really four different melodies. One of them's a bass line. 4 different melodies that all use some version of that, except one of them really ignores the 4 plus 3.5 thing. If you take 4 and then 3.5 and then 4 and 3.5 and add it all up, over the course of those 4 measures, there's 15 beats of 4/4. Or 15 beats of quarter notes, and one of the parts really just deals with that. It doesn't really have that half a beat hiccup within it. So how to convey that along with the others is its own little challenge. So there's a number of ways you can fake this sort of thing. But I don't want to fake it. I want to try to get as real as possible, meaning I want the playback to be right. I want the measure numbering to be right. I want it to be so that if I export it to Music XML, other programs will possibly read it correctly. And I want it to work well with MuseScore 3 when that comes out. Some of you may have seen that just today we released a second alpha, an alpha 2 version of MuseScore 3. Before I start actually entering the music, I do want to just return to the story of this CD. This CD, Back to Saturn of Hugh Reagan, this was the first recording, professional recording that I participated on. I kind of helped organize this along with my friend Eric Turkman, and we put this together for Hugh Reagan. And in our mind, I was still working at Hewlett-Packard. Eric had just gone off to school and was wanting to get back into music a little bit. And we decided we wanted to put this recording together, and our goal was to have it come out on the Black Saint record label, which was a sort of small but important Italian jazz label for sort of avant-garde or whatever, for, you know, a certain type of adventurous jazz. And so that was our goal. And so we rounded up the musicians, and including Hugh, who we had worked with, and put this recording out. And we approached Black Saint, and Hugh knew the guy from Black Saint from having played on other Black Saint recordings, or at least played on other recordings that people who played on Black Saint had made. And they agreed to put it out, but it took like 10 years to do. So we had this dream of doing this recording, and we made the music, we wrote the music, we recorded it, and we approached the record company, and we managed to make that happen. By the time it came out, I had long since left HP and gone into music full time. But anyhow, this was a realization of a dream when that recording finally came out. Sorry, I'm still not totally over the cold that I was also struggling with last week. All right, so now let's go on to looking at the actual music here. So what I want to do is I am going to create a new score here. And what I've decided, I haven't actually tried this yet because I really want to experiment in front of you guys because it's kind of fun for me. What I'm going to do is I'm going to choose some instruments. It really could be written for any number of different instruments. I'm going to just simplify it for myself, and I think, well, I'm actually going to go with what's on the recording. So what we had was a trumpet, we had a vibraphone, or actually it was marimba, now that I think about it. And we're just going to need a single staff. And then we had a piano, and then we have bass. So these are the instruments, and I am going to create it for those instruments. There's no key signature, not because it's in the key of C, but there's no key. So I'm going to use the atonal key signature, which also I think did not exist in Notator. I could be wrong about that, but I don't think it had that concept. So, time signature. I've thought about this some. The way I think I'm going to do this is I'm going to notate the piece in 4/4, and then I'm going to basically take half a beat out of every measure. Now, the other possibility that I've thought about is that I could notate it in 15/8 and then split every measure in half. And that might be the better way. In fact, that's what I think I'm going to do. I just talked myself into this. So I'm going to go 15/8. And once again, while I'm doing video broadcasts, for some reason, these spin boxes get hiccups in them. And this only happens while I'm doing these broadcasts for some reason. So I've got 15/8, and I don't really need any more than 4 measures for what I'm doing. So I'm just going to trust that that worked. So I'm going to have 15/8, and I'm going to create my score. All right, so now I have these measures of 15/8, and I say again, 15/8 is what? 4/4. 4/4 is like 8/8, and then 3.5 over 4 is like 7/8. Combine that, I've got 15/8. So if I enter my notes and then split the measure in half, I'll have a measure of 4/4 and a measure of 3.5/4. But I don't want it to display as 15/8. So actually, the first thing I want to do, and now if I had smarts, I would have done this ahead of time, but I didn't. I want to go to time signature properties and tell it to not display it as 15/8. I want to display it as 4 plus 3.5. And I see now that 3.5 is not, I can't type a point in here. So that's a limitation that is on, let's see, can I do a slash? No, I can't. So that's a nice limitation. I remember someone commenting about that. They wanted to put a decimal point in there just like a week ago, and maybe that's what put this in my head. Well, I'm going to leave it at 15/8 for now, and think about whether I can improve this later. So I'll just escape out of here. Let me actually enter some of the notes. So the trumpet part, so what I have, I mentioned that I lost, try copy and pasting. That's a good idea. Does it work? Did you try it? I think what happens is in that dialogue, it only accepts the characters that exist in the time signature, that we have time signature characters for. But let's see if I can try some text and say 3.5 and copy paste that. I know you said a half, but I really want 0.5. I could put the half. Time signature properties. Yeah, that's not working to paste that. So I don't think that's going to work. All right, but I will see if I can fudge the appearance of that later. I'm just going to go with the actual notes. So I mentioned when I did this in Notator originally, I printed it, and then even if I could find the file, I probably, do I even still have that Atari computer in a basement somewhere? Maybe, but there's no way I would be able to actually access those files. I have the print somewhere, also in a box in a basement somewhere, but I couldn't find it. So what I had to do is go listen to the recording and transcribe this thing again. So I went, and I remembered it. I mean, I went and played it through on the piano some, and kind of remembered how it went, and then listened to the recording to check my work against it. So what I have is a poorly scribbled out rendition that I'm going to work from here in entering this. And entering the notes isn't particularly difficult or interesting, although the let's take a look at the beat pattern, because since I entered this as 15/8, ideally, like look at how it's going to try to beam things. This is terrible. This is not what I want. So really, what I should be thinking about is how I want this beamed. Since I can't do this 4 plus 3.5 thing, I'm starting to question my decision to notate it as 15/8 and then split the measure up. But whatever. There's multiple ways of doing things. What I'm going to do, and I realize I'm going to have to do this for each staff separately, unless I want to do a custom palette. So what I could do, right? So that's are not won't display, so that doesn't work. Yeah, there you go. I'm looking at the comments. So I want my eighths to be beamed in 4s. Oh, I want to change my shorter values too. So I want my eighths to be beamed in 4s, 4 and then 3, and then 4, 3, 4. So what am I counting wrong? 4, 4, 4, 4, 3 is what I want. 4, 4, 4, 3. And then the 16ths, I really want beamed individual beats. So, and I'm not going to deal with 30 seconds in this piece. So this is how I want the beaming to work. So I'm going to do this, but I've really only modified this one. Really, I want all my 15/8s to behave the same way. So really what I should have done is gone to the actual, if I press Shift-T to get to the time signature palette in the master palette, I can create my own 15/8 here that is actually set up that way. And that's the smarter way to do things. If I had done that, then I could have added the 15/8 to the score and everyone would get that same beaming. It's a little too late to do that. I have to change it to 4/4 and back to 15/8 to get it to work, because if I create a 15/8 and then add it here, MuseScore is going to be a little too smart and realize, oh, nothing changed, and it won't change my beaming. But that's okay. I can change my beaming manually. Or change each time signature. So I'm going to enter some of the notes and just get on with that. The trumpet part has an 8th rest, and then it's got C. Am I in concert pitch? No, I am not. Concert pitch. All right, there we go. So there's my first mistake, or 5th mistake or something. So, and then another 8th note, a 16th rest, and then F sharp, and then G sharp, and then D, an octave up, and then C, and then a 16th rest, and then E down here, F sharp again. Now, I'm going to rely on a plugin for accidentals, actually, but I think I want to repeat the F sharp there. This music is atonal enough and odd enough that I think I want to see accidentals pretty much everywhere. So the Courtesy Accidentals plugin will give me that ability. I may or may not want to do it. I could create 8 plus 7 over 8. Yeah, I could. You're right. I could make this display as 8 plus 7 over 8, which, let me just do that. That's a good suggestion, because at least then I get to see, you get to see that this works. So 8 plus 7 over 8. So now it displays the way I want it to display. So let me go back to entering my notes. A high D, and then a 16th note C, and then 8th note G sharp, and then 16th note D up here, but also F sharp. Ideally, that would have been someone playing a third, but 2 notes if I had 2 trumpets. When I wrote the piece, I didn't know exactly how the instrumentation was going to work. And actually, I play this on piano later on in the same piece. These parts are interchangeable, is the idea. The bass part's always the bass part, but the rest of us trade off on who's playing what. So I want to tie that to an 8th note, and then I don't really want that beamed. I'm going to deal with that in a minute. And then I will tie it to a half note also. There we go. So is this because I got my beaming wrong, or is it just because I told it... see, now I'm confusing myself. 1, bum, bum, boop, boop, boop. So what's happening is I told it I wanted 8th notes all beamed together, but because of the oddness of the rhythm, it's not realizing that this one shouldn't be broken. Probably I could go into time signature properties and improve how I have notated this. I think what happens is if there's mixed between 8th and 16th, it looks at 30 seconds to help resolve this. So I could, by breaking up with the 30 seconds, maybe get the defaults to do a little better. Sometimes it's worth it to me to do that. Right now it's not. Right now I think I just want to break this myself. So I'm going to go to beam properties and start a new beam here. So now I'm looking at this and going, did I get this right? So 1 bum bum, boom bum bum bum, boom bum bum. So I feel like 1 bum bum, boom bum bum bum, boom bum bum bum. So this really, I don't want an 8th note here. I think just the automatic rest threw me. I really want this to be a half note and then tied to an 8th. When I scribbled out by hand, I didn't even notate the length of that note. I just sort of went with just a quarter note and knew it lasted until the end of the measure. Yeah, that's the correct length there. So that is how that part looks. If I quickly enter The marimba part, well, I'm going to skip the marimba part. I want to get the bass line in there. The bass line is 16th notes. G, do, do, and then boom, rest. Doopity boom boop. And then a eighth rest. C, and then C, C sharp. Boo, and then D sharp. Oh, D sharp was already sharp. D sharp, E. See, that's why by this point, I've already forgotten that this D sharp is still in effect, because I feel like I'm in another measure at this point. So I really think I want to have a courtesy accidental there. Oh, good. You've filed an issue on the missing ability to put in dots. Great. Thank you. One. This should also start a new beat. So this is because I didn't define the beaming rules for all my time signatures. Not each time signature on each staff could have its own beaming rules, since I didn't add it to the master palette. So rather than do this, and because I realized it didn't necessarily do exactly what I wanted anyhow, I'm just going to deal with these things manually. That's where I want to break this beam, and then break this beam, and then I have an eighth rest, and then I have a quarter rest, and then I have some 16th notes. F sharp, still F sharp, yep. B. And then I got 3 left, B. There we go. So this is the basic pattern for the bass. Now, before I forget, I'm also going to go ahead and save this guy, just because I always get a little nervous if I've been doing a bunch of stuff, especially complicated things, and you know, I haven't saved it. So I'm going to save this. It's called Goblin Market. All right. So if I just play this right now, let's see what I have. All right, so it's too fast. We put in a tempo marking. Well, let's see what 80 sounds like. That's probably about it. Oh, that's actually still too fast. Oh, that's because it says dotted quarter. Check it out. It's going with a dotted quarter because it thinks 15/8 is a compound meter, which sometimes it is, but it's not right now. It's not in this grouping. And I guess I need to also, let's just, I think, looks like I deleted the space but not the dot. So I think it's capable of following that. All right, so that's actually a little too slow, but that's okay. So this is the piece. At least this is this measured. The next line of the bass is almost exactly the same, so I just hit R to reproduce it, except the end, this goes down to B, and then it's B flat, or I'm going to call it A sharp. And then instead of this, it's got an eighth, it's going to have an eighth rest, so 4, and then I'm going to just delete that, so I've got a rest, and then it's going to have eighth notes. Actually, I'm going to go back and spell this as B flat. That's how I did it in my handwritten version, so I can just repeat the B flat here, and then A. There we go. So let's get rid of the inspector. I'm not going to need it for what I'm doing. So I now have these two measures here, and that's really all the measures I need. So I'm going to delete those two. And let's go with page width here so we can, is that going to be good enough? No, I guess I want to go with whole page so I can really see the thing. Yeah, if I change my, if I just go to continuous view, that might be a little better even. There we go. And I'll go with 75%, good enough. All right, so I can see almost everything in here. This measure really does repeat here, and then there's other parts here that also, the marimba part is also going to repeat. What I'm interested in doing now, I said I want to split this measure in half. There's tempo on the palette with different bass notes. Oh yeah, if I go to the palette, if I'd added the tempo with the palette, I could have explicitly chosen the quarter note. I just wasn't remembering that I was going to get a dotted quarter, because usually if you press Alt-T as a shortcut for entering the tempo, you get something reasonable. But in this case, MuseScore outsmarted me. It thought 15/8 was compound meter, which it could have been. It is divisible by 3. It's just not what I wanted. All right, so what I want to do now is I want to split this measure up. I said that I entered it as one big 15/8 measure. The other alternative would have been to create it as 4/4 and then just rob every other measure of half a beat, and I could have done that in time signature properties. I'm not going to do that here, but I want to show you. If I go to measure, I'm sorry, not time signature properties, measure properties. Here, if I had entered it originally as 4/4, I could select any measure I wanted and then change that one measure to 7/8, which is basically 3.5 over 4. And that would rob that measure of half a beat. And I could go through every other measure and do that. That just felt like it was going to be more work than splitting my measures. I feel like splitting the measures is a little easier and it's going to have the same effect. So I have, except the beaming might have worked out a little better if I had done it the other way, but whatever. So 1 bum bum ba-doo ba-dum ba-doo ba-bum. That's my beat 4, right? Bum bum ba-doo ba-dum ba-doo ba-1. That's when I say my beat 4. That's after 4 beats. This is where I want to split the measure. This is the start of the second measure, the 3.5 measure in the piece. You can see here's beat 1, there's beats 2 and 3, and there's the fraction of beat 4. I'll look at whether this is really what I want, but I think it is. As far as how I'm notating that tie there, how I broke it up. So what I want to do is I want to split my measure right here. So I'm going to go to Edit, Measure, Split Measure before selected note. Looks like at some point I defined a shortcut for it, because I'm pretty sure that's not a default shortcut. I think I did it more as a test than anything else. So is there a plugin to split them programmatically? In other words, like a plugin that would go through and every other measure split, or every measure split at that point. There's not one currently. You want to write one? It's probably possible. I don't know for sure if the plugin framework exposes that command. So I'm not sure is the answer. So I've now split this thing, and I basically have a measure of 4. I have a measure of 3.5. And again, I'm not positive this is the best way of notating 3.5, right? It's not a standard thing. I can clearly see one beat. I can clearly see beats 2 and 3, and then I can see the half a beat left over for 4. I could say, well, this half note, it would be better if I exposed beat 3, right? Change this to a quarter note tied to a dotted quarter. Maybe that is the way to go. I'm going to do that. Since I'm going to have a tie anyhow, I'm going to tie that to a quarter. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy that. And then I'm going to change that to a dotted quarter. And then I'm going to tie. So that's probably a little better, because now I've exposed beat 3. And even in the time signature of 3.5 over 4 as opposed to 4/4, I feel like exposing beat 3 is a good thing, because that is how I'm feeling this thing. It's really 4/4 with the last half of beat missing. That's the way this groove works. So this is how I would enter that. The marimba part I didn't enter yet, but let me go ahead and just do that quickly so we can see that it's going to honor that bar line nicely, and I can convince myself that I'm doing this correctly. 16th note, boop, 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 bum, bum, and then 8th note, bum, and then 16th, bum, bum, and then 8th rest, and then G tied over, and then and 16ths. Now, when I wrote this out, I didn't put that bar line in there. I didn't put in bar lines because I wasn't thinking about that yet. I just transcribed the notes. So I'm hoping that's the right place. 1, boo-ba-doo-ba-dum-ba-boo-dum, bum. And that's my 1. So yeah, bum, boo-dum. And then a 16th rest. And then, oops, I said a 16th rest and I only did an 8th rest. So let's try that again. 16th rest and then 16th note, A, G sharp, and then there is left over a quarter note and an 8th rest if I did this right, which I didn't. So what did I get wrong? Oh, that's because this is supposed to be an 8th note. I'm going off of my handwritten thing, which is accurate but not detailed because I didn't put in the mid-measure bar lines that I would need to divide it up. I just wrote out the notes. So at this point, I then have my quarter and 8th left over. Great. And then this figure also, I'm going to break up. This is where I want the beam to break. So beam break there, boop, ba-da-da, and then beam break here. And by the way, you can define shortcuts for these beam commands. If you do a lot of funny time signature things, then you probably want shortcuts for these. I use the same time signatures over and over again. I've already set them up how I want. 7, 8 I do use. So I haven't bothered defining shortcuts for these. I've defined them, but then I revert to factory settings every once in a while, and it hasn't been worth my while to restore them. So this is just what I have. This same pattern then repeats, except the last is going to be it's going to be G, F sharp, and actually, so these notes are going to have another note below them. So what I'm going to do, since the shortcuts to add a note below aren't enabled by default, I'm going to just go ahead and lower these to what my lower notes need to be, E flat and D, and then I'm going to press Shift 3 to add a note a third above. Shift 3. Oh, Alt 3, sorry, Alt 3. And then it's really an F sharp. So these are my notes for everything except the piano part. The piano part is the one that is going to be in a straight 15. I mean, this is 15/8, right, written as 4 measures of a measure of 4/4, a measure of 3/4, and then another measure of, which adds up to 15/8, and then another measure of 4/4. Oh, I didn't split this one up, right? So I need to do the same thing here. Split, edit, measure, split. And hopefully all my beaming, when I did the copy and paste, all my beaming adjustments look like they were preserved, so that's great. So this is the part where I need 15/4, basically. This is really going to be, instead of having this weird hiccup here, it's really all quarter notes. And unfortunately, it's all quarter notes with quarter note triplets across it, which is actually going to make this totally not really easily doable. And in other words, I'm going to have quarter note triplets that are going to straddle this line here. And so I'm going to make that happen. The alternative that I thought about but didn't actually do was create this as one giant measure and then put fake bar lines in here. Fake bar lines that would split up visually this into separate measures but wouldn't actually create separate measures. So for purposes of measure numbering and export and all sorts of other things, it wouldn't really be quite right. It would look right. I would have to add extra space and all sorts of other things to get this to even look right. I decided I would rather have that be right, and I would rather play games with how I'm going to write this one part that's actually in 15/4 and is going to have quarter note triplets across the bar line, in part because that to me is a more interesting problem to solve, and needing to create triplets, quarter note triplets that cross the bar line happens. To tell another story. Okay, but I see a comment also about local time signatures. That's not actually going to work here because local time signatures allows you to have different time signatures in one staff versus another, but the bar lines have to be in the same place. So it's not actually going to help. Plus, local time signatures are very, very kind of experimental feature. There's bugs galore in them, but it also isn't going to give me what I want. I actually need my bar lines to be in different places. So, right, yeah, so fake bar lines, not the way to go. So the way I'm going to do it is, I think, the right way. And just to tell another little story, one of my other jobs that I've had in the past, so Hal Leonard is a publisher company that put out a version of The Real Book, which is sort of the most common jazz fake book out there and has been for many, many years, but it used to be illegal. Hal Leonard put out a legal version, and I posted a review of it the day it came out because I had a friend who works in a music store, and he gave me a call that, hey, these new fake books in, you ought to come check it out. And so I did. I spent a few hours going over it, posted a review that night, and this is it. They were all proud of it, and so as soon as I posted that review, the guys who worked on it, including the vice president of the company, were like Googling themselves to see, well, what are people saying about my fake book? And they saw my review, which was very detailed, very insightful, I think, and they thought so too. And they called me up and said, wow, that was very insightful. Sounds like you know what you're doing. Would you like to help us work on the next volume? And so I actually got involved in the Real Book project, doing some of the transcriptions for the next volume of the Real Book. And the audition, if you will, the first chart that I did was a Vince Guaraldi piece, Cast Your Fate to the Wind. No, was it Cast Your Fate to the Wind? Yeah, it must have been. It had Quarternote triplets crossing the bar line. I was using Finale at the time, and so I had to decide if that was the best way to notate it and go ahead and figure out how to do it. So what I'm going to do is enter the music here and look at how I might make these Quarternote triplets crossing the bar line, which I know how to do in normal cases, but here with this half a beat hiccup, boy, it's going to be interesting. So this is a part that goes A sharp, B, and then B flat tied to a dotted quarter, and then eighth, and then and then E flat, and then tied to a dotted quarter, and then a D. All right, so this is where I need to break this beam. So this is what's going to happen here. So I really don't want to see this bar line. I don't know. I don't mind seeing that one. I'm not actually sure. Since I said my original version of this, I didn't really have a good strategy. I just did whatever notator allowed me to do, and I no longer have that for reference. I think I'm going to try just hiding that bar line. It doesn't bother me to see it here. I don't know. I'm actually going to keep that bar line, but this bar line is going to bug me because now I'm going to need to have a series of Quarternote triplets crossing this bar line. So my very first Quarternote triplet, if you think about it, Quarternote triplet lasts 2 beats. I don't have 2 beats left in this measure, right? So in order to have Quarternote triplets here, the third one is going to spill over into this measure. And there's no good way to make that happen. Right? There's no great way to make that happen. So this is going to be a bit of an experiment to figure out what the best way of doing this is, because it's, again, I've known how to do this if I've had a whole number of beats because I've worked out the math before, but there's going to be a little math involved in my figuring this out. What time is it, by the way? Okay. You'll hopefully are people watching this live hopefully are finding this interesting, but I know lots of more people watch this later as well. And I'm hopefully going to be able to figure this out in a not not too much amount of time. So I'm going to try to work out the math here. If I want a quarter note triplet to basically go in here, it's going to be, how am I going to try to word this? The whole thing takes 2 beats, right? A quarter note triplet takes 2 beats. So it's going to take, and I see I've got a beat and a half left in this measure. So that means there is an 1/8 note here in this measure. In other words, my quarter note triplet is going to take this much room. And then the next quarter note triplet, because it's a whole series of quarter note triplets. If I hold this up, if you can see it, I think I get the camera angle right here. There's 1, 2, 3, 4 quarter note triplets, and then 2 1/8 notes left over, is how this is going to pan out. So here's one of my quarter note triplets. Let me just go ahead and enter the rest. The next one is, there's a half note, and then again there's a beat and a half here, and then I'm going to have another. So here's my first 2 beats, there's my second 2 beats, my third 2 beats, and then my fourth 2 beats, and then there's 1 beat left over for 2 1/8 notes. So that's essentially it. Really, when I think about this, I really think of that. I mean, so I wrote this as 4 sets of quarter note triplets followed by 2 1/8 notes. I'm not convinced, and so that adds up to 14 notes. I'm not convinced this isn't really one big 14 tuplet, but I think I really feel it as quarter note triplets. I just feel like there really should only be, these last 2 1/8 notes should really be 2 more quarter note triplets, but the math doesn't work out that way. There's exactly 1 beat left over, and so they're just 1/8 notes. And I remember struggling with that realization when I first wrote the piece, and just decided that's how it is, because when I count this, those quarter note triplets do lie with the beat. It's not one big 14 tuplet. So anyhow, I can enter quarter note triplets easily in here, so I'm just going to do that. I'm just going to enter my quarter note triplet there and enter my quarter note triplet here. So I need to create, and I'm just going to go ahead and put the notes in also. So the second one, the first one has got some notes. The second one, though, is B, F, A, and then there's something else here, and then this last one is F sharp, D, F natural, and then there's 2 1/8 notes left over, and that's E, C. All right, so all I need to do at this point is solve this problem of the phantom quarter note triplet thing. So here's what I think I want to do. What I think I want to do is get the first, I'm debating, do I want to show all 3 notes before the bar line, or do I want to show the 3rd note over in here? Technically speaking, if I were to work out the math, let's follow this, over the course of 2 beats, the 3rd note, the first note happens, if I think in terms of percentages, the first note happens at 0% of those 2 beats. The next note happens at 33%. The 3rd note happens at 66%, okay? This note is at 0. This note's at 50. This note's at 75%. The 3rd note of the triplet actually happens just before the bar line, not after the bar line. Is that significant? Well, it is significant. If I were to do this correctly, I would put all 3 notes of the triplet here with the 3rd one just before the bar line, and then I would just hide this rest. That's sort of the correct way to do it. I feel like lying a little bit and placing the 3rd note of the triplet after the bar line might be smarter for some reason, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to maybe try it over here. But for here, what I'm going to do is just going to hide that rest, now that I know that all 3 notes of my triplet are going to go here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to think about this as I have 2 beats that I want to divide into 3 parts, right? So each note lasts for 2/3 of a beat. If I want to get that to happen here, I want to create a ratio that's going to work for that here. And this is where I have to do math in my head. If I want this to actually work out correctly, I would have to do some pretty fancy math on this. I'm not convinced that I'm going to get that technically exactly right, but I'm going to try this. I'm going to try going to notes, tuplets. So I'm going to first change this to a dotted quarter rest so I can just do the thing correctly. If I divide this up into 6 pieces and think of it as 1, 2, 3. See, I'm trying to do math in my head. I'll tell you what I'm thinking, and y'all can maybe be one step ahead of me on this, or just let it be. I want the notes to place so that 2/3 of a beat. The second note is going to place somewhere around here and then somewhere around there. I could probably do that by coming up with just the right ratio for this thing. In other words, if I call this a sextuplet, and then I go through and, except I don't want it to display as a sextuplet. See, so I'm going to need to use notes, tuplets, and then other. And I'm going to have to think through my ratio. I want it to be 3 notes in the space of 2 and display that way. But when I do that, it's just going to give me a triplet. It's not going to be, what I want it to be. It's just going to give me a triplet. So, but what I can do now, if I enter a quarter note and then another quarter note. Now, did this just corrupt this? Is this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 eighth notes? Is that correct? If I told it that I wanted 3 in the space of 2, I think that might actually be pretty good. It's a quarter note and a quarter note, and then a little bit left over, and then this adds up to about a beat. So what I've done is I've fudged the math. In other words, what I did probably doesn't actually make mathematical sense, but it gives me kind of what I want. In other words, it gives me 3 notes here on this side of the bar line, with the third note kind of closer to the bar line, right? It's rhythmically closer and physically closer. So this note tied to that note is going to be approximately a quarter note. Is it exactly a quarter note? I don't know. I would have to do more math, than I can do right now in my head. But I'm going to go ahead and enter these notes. And the notes are A, C. And now I'm going to enter the G. If I enter a G, it's going to try to enter a note and then tie it and clobber what I just had, right? So I don't want that. I'm just going to enter a 16th note G, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to hide these flags if I can. So let me zoom in and just hide the flags. Now hopefully that didn't hide the stem also. It looks like it did, but I think it's because the flag is hiding the stem. Let me go to View and turn off the display of invisible things. Yeah, the stem is still good. So if you look at this, you see why I was hedging on whether I really wanted this note to display here, because now it looks like this note is supposed to appear on 1, and it doesn't. It really appears an 8th note into it. So if I had entered this as a 16th and then tied it to that 8th, if I had actually, in fact, I could just go ahead and do that. I've got an invisible 8th rest here. Can I get to it? Yeah. I just press the left arrow and I can make it visible again, and I can make this a G. I could tie this, right? And if I do this, there's no lying. Is it correct? Well, I am lying about the invisible flags here. So let me go back and make these visible again for a second. And select them, make them visible. If I do this, this is correct-ish. I mean, I don't know that my ratio is exactly right. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to solo this track So I'm going to go to the mixer, and I'm going to take that piano staff and solo it and see what this sounds like. See if it's discernible. And maybe I want the metronome on. Oh, is it going to give me eighth notes? Yeah, I don't think I'm going to want that metronome. Wow, if that wasn't perfect triplets, you couldn't prove it by me. That sure sounded an awful lot like triplets to me. So select flags at the bottom of the. Oh yeah, right. So if I select a note, and then in the inspector, which of course I've hidden, I can I can select the flag hook there, and then without having to zoom in. That would have been another way to have selected the flag. So let me review though what I've just done here. When I played this thing, this was like almost perfect. Perfect enough that if I do another one, I'm going to be quite happy with this. So I'm going to change this to a dotted quarter again and then do the same thing. I went to, if I do, that's going to do that. So what I had to do was, that was Control 3, which was, it knows that you can make a triplet out of a dotted quarter by just making plain eighth note, so it did that. But when I went to tuplets other and gave it an explicit ratio of 3/2, now it's going to try to notate it as quarter notes, and it's going to realize, well, it doesn't actually fit, and it gave me that crazy thing. Now what happened there? Oh, I'm in note input mode and can't do that. Let's try it again. Notes, tuplets, other, 3/2. There we go. So again, I enter my quarter notes. This is a G sharp, E, and then I'm going to enter just that 16th note, G, and then I'm going to manually tie it. Because if you try to tie while you're still in note input mode, the tuplets are going to really confuse things, and that's how it ended up kind of obliterating the next tuplet. So I'll manually enter my G, and then I'll go back and tie it. When we listen to this, I think you'll be able to tell. In fact, let me just enter some quarter notes down here. All right, so if I solo, I already have this soloed. I think we'll hear that this is basically quarter note triplets. Yeah. So I did that math in my head. And I did it in my head, and it was more of a back of the envelope math. When I saw that 3/2 ratio, I sort of looked at it and said, you know what, that's probably going to do something reasonable. I didn't really overthink it. But what I was thinking is, I want to fit 3 notes in where only 2 would normally fit. Well, in the space of in the space of a beat and a half, what you would normally be able to fit 2 of are dotted quarter notes, are dotted half notes, right? You can fit, dotted eighth notes. So when I had that dotted quarter selected here and then said 3/2 ratio, it said, well, I want to put 3 things in where there would normally be 2. If you've got a dotted quarter selected, normally you would be able to fit 2 dotted eighths in there. So that ratio said, give me 3 dotted eighths in that same space. So 3 dotted eighths, each dotted eighth is like 3/16. So it gave me 9/16 in this space. So this became the first, and then I took the first 4 of them, combined them into a quarter, the next 4 of them combined into a quarter, and then there was this left over. So that's how I sort of quickly in my head guesstimated that this was going to do something reasonable. It was going to give me something that looked a little asymmetric and hopefully would allow me to fit 2 quarter notes in here and have a little bit left over. But I didn't really work out the math on it. When I listened to it, I became convinced that it was pretty accurate. So one way I would be able to test that theory would be to actually go to another measure and enter the same thing, but then enter real quarter note triplets. In other words, if I add another measure to this, I got to do this because now I'm so curious. I'm going to add another measure here, and in it, I'm going to create a regular quarter note triplet. Oh boy, what is this? So, it looks like maybe, oh, because this isn't a measure of 15/8. This is not a measure of 4/4. That's okay. I was looking at that going, oh my gosh, this thing is corrupt as hell. But no, it's not. This is just a measure of 15/8. So there's that. And now in this staff, I'm going to enter the thing I did before, which was a dotted quarter rest. And then I'm going to divide that the same way I did before, which was notes, tuplets, other, 3/2. And I'm going to enter quarter note, quarter rests here. So my question is this quarter rest on the same beat as that quarter rest? Well, I think MuseScore is going to tell me that right down here. So this tells me this is beat 2.16667. This guy is beat 2.16667. So I think I got it right. This guy is beat 3.3333. This guy is beat 3.3333. So this does actually line up the same way. Okay, thank you for doing that math on me. So I let MuseScore do the math for me, and it told me pretty much the same thing. So I'm going to get rid of this measure now because it's no longer needed. I'll leave it there just to remind myself of how I did that. But this is now my piece. And now what I get to do is look at how I want to visualize. Let me get rid of those notes. I don't need them anymore. Again, if I want this to look like plain quarter note triplets, I'm just going to play a trick here. I'm going to hide that. I'm going to hide this. And I think I'm going to hide that whole note here. Not the whole note, but the note. So then again, if I go to the view menu and turn off the display of invisible things, I get this. So this is bothering me because this I know is not, doesn't come in until the and this makes it look like that's not the case, right? It looks like this note happens on 1. There is no great way of indicating this except to lie. And this isn't great either. But one thing we can do is lie about the position of this note. Pretend that it comes in after the bar line. So that if I were to try to take this thing and move it with the inspector, and so I have to confess, I don't know what's going to happen when I try this. What I'm afraid is it's going to just expand the measure to make room for it. But I'm going to go horizontal offset and start moving this puppy. Well, there we go. So if I do that, it kind of gives me the look that I want. It looks like quarter note triplet straddling the bar line. I think that if I just hid the bar line, it might make me happier, right? If I just, because this is a lie. This note does not happen after the bar line. This is a total lie, and this manual adjustment is probably not going to look right if this score reformats and this measure gets narrower. That's not going to look right. So although I can do that, I'm not crazy about that idea. What I would rather do is simply hide that bar line. And then I'm also going to do the same trick here. I'm going to hide all of this stuff that I don't need, including the bar line. And when I do that, and then I also don't need that bottom staff there, so I'm just going to go ahead and get rid of it because I'm not really using 2 staffs of piano, 2 staves. All right, At this point, ooh, what's going on here? Corruption? What happened? What the heck? Look at this. It moved. Did I get rid of the wrong staff, or did it just do something really weird? Look at that. So I'm not sure what just happened, but I want to undo that if I can. Can I? Wow. So something really weird just happened when I tried to delete that staff. I deleted that staff, and then things got really messed up. So there is a bug there that I think we just uncovered somehow. But look at that. Whatever I just did, when I saw the bug, it's because I saw this extra rest overlapping notes here in the bass part, but I just, by undoing something, that went away. I just need to finish that job there now, and there we go. So what happened is it tried to extend the bar line there. I know that, and then maybe that did something weird. When I deleted the second staff of the piano part, it still thought, well, that bar line needs to extend for 2 staves, and extended down to the bass part, which isn't what I meant to do. But so that much is I expected. What I didn't expect was to see these phantom rests in the bass part, but they're gone now, so I'll pretend I didn't see them. This is now more or less what I think I want to see. And I guess I'm not positive that this bar line is doing me any favors. I'm going to get rid of that also. So I really do just have one big measure of 15/4 here. And now I guess I will just delete this here. And so what I could do now is go through this guy. I'm going to actually say that I want to be 15/4, to display as 15/4. And I can totally put in some, well, I don't want fake bar lines. This is it's just a funny measure. It's a really funny measure. This is basically the piece. And if I go through and time signature properties on this guy, let's make this 8 + 7/8 also. This guy, hey, didn't I just do that? All right, I feel like it's glitching enough on me that I want to hit save before I cause any permanent damage. And one more, and then I think I can play it and call it good. So the actual piece involves just these 4 lines that sort of overlap each other. Like the bass comes in first, then we add the piano doubling the bass, and then we add the marimba, then we add the trumpet, then we add me playing this line on a synthesizer. But later on, the trumpet's playing this line, I'm playing this line on piano, etc. So the score is really just this, just these few measures. Let's go back to Control 0. Yeah, when I'm doing these broadcasts, these spin boxes get really glitchy for some reason, because I don't do that except when I'm on camera, I promise. Oh yeah, let me go back and turn off the... So anyhow, yeah, what I'm kind of getting at is that there is nothing more to the score than this. In other words, it just had these 4 parts written above each other, and then I sort of stage directed, okay, you play this line, now you play this line, you play this line, you improvise now, you play this line, etc. It was all kind of directed that way. And so really these 4 measures of 8.5, or 4 + 3.5/4 is all there is to the piece. If I play it now, this should be... it should sound more or less like the recording. So that's basically the piece. That's tempo. It's a little slow. Let me call it 92. Right. So that's the piece. If I go back to Spotify and play it, hopefully that will hear that's what we're hearing. I think all the parts are in at around the 45-second mark, I think. Now let's see. Here comes the triplet line. So that's the thing. If I could change this to a synthesizer sound, I might as well just do that. That's like some goofy, that was an 80s, well, it was an 80s synthesizer, even though I was playing it in the 90s. Let me just go ahead and change it to something appropriately synthesizer-y. I don't know what my synth sounds are on here because I so rarely think about synths. What are all these sounds? That doesn't sound like it. That sounds too... that's close. There you go. I can see I forgot that the adjustment I made to this spelling of the rhythm I didn't make here, so let me fix that now. I got one measure, two measures, one measure. I feel like if I compress this all, I can get it. There we go. So I just did the reduce stretch command. So there you have it. This was it was something I felt like I needed to do, I wanted to do, and hopefully some of you are getting the idea that, yeah, there are interesting things that, oh, look at this. So the tie across now that I split the tie up across a line break, I need to actually make both halves of that tie invisible. And there we go. This should be, this should be, these rests are not notated properly, rest, and then the quarter rest. I'm gonna go ahead and leave those all beamed together, that's fine. But yeah, at this point, this is now in better shape than what we actually worked from on the recording. If I were to actually write this out as an arrangement, I'd be now making, you know, more copy and paste to say, oh, it is the bass first, everyone else rest, then we add this. I can make a score out of it. I'm not convinced that that's better for performance sake than this, and then just kind of pointing to people as they come in, because that's really how we did this. Now tie is broken up, we found the same thing. So that's yeah, I saw that on my own, but thank you for pointing that out. So that tie is fixed. Now this unfortunately looks a little weirder. You know, when this was all on one line, it made me a little happier that this note didn't line up at the beginning of the measure. Now it does look a little weird. I still don't know really the best way to do this. Maybe to put a note, maybe instead of hiding that note, if I'd put it in parentheses, that might have been a little better. I don't know. These are notational decisions that you can make on your own. But so here at least you've gotten to see quite a few different things that you can do with MuseScore as far as some really hairy time signature kind of stuff. That all this should work. These are real measures that will work with the measure numbering. It should work as I reformat the score, other than the fact that that tie broke there and I had to hide the second half of the tie. That was like one little glitch that happened. But for the most part, this is a pretty safe arrangement of things. The same thing will happen if I put a line break here, by the way. If I put a line break here, now that second half of the tie is also going to need hiding. So I need to go in, select it, and hide it also. What I don't know is what will happen if I delete that line break and then add it again. Will it remember? Probably not. Yeah, it did. Okay, good. So anyhow, you got to see me create a time signature. I really just I created it by telling it I wanted 15.8 in the score, but then you also saw me bring up that time signature palette where I could have created my own time signature with custom beaming and everything. I tried customizing the beaming here, but the combination of 16ths and 8ths was a little more than I could get to do exactly what I wanted, so I had to customize things anyhow manually, so I didn't worry about that. I just did all my beaming by using the beams palette here. And so now I ended up with something that I think is pretty spot on. This is 1, 2, 3. So this really technically shouldn't be beamed together, but I think since I beamed these 16ths together, I liked how that beamed together. What I'm going to do is I'm going to extend the beam over that and give me the same look. So I selected the rest and told it. Actually, if I had selected the rest and said start a beam, does that do the same thing? Yeah, it looks like it does. I got there. Yeah, started, because that's more accurate. It's really this, I want the beam to start here. So this shows me that this last beat and a half is all beamed together, because that's how it is in the previous measure, and I like that better really for this particular line. Boop up up boop up up. I like that better than saying it was 4/16 and 2, because that's not how the line goes. It really feels like it's a beat and a half altogether. So I liked it beamed that way. So anyhow, there's a lot going on here. There's this customization of the display of the time signature. There was the splitting of the measure. As I mentioned, I could have done it by going to measure properties and then just stealing half a beat from every other measure, but instead I chose to split measures. I hid bar lines so I could get one part to have basically a longer measure than the rest. I did funny math to get my Quarternote triplets to lie across the bar line. And as I mentioned, if you don't have this funny half a beat thing, getting Quarternotes that start on beat 4 is the same process. It's just a little simpler. Or maybe it's not simpler. It just was easier for me to have worked out the math way back when. So beam properties, messing with how I did the tuplets, playing around with the beaming here to do what I wanted it to do. And I think I now have a pretty usable version of this score. I do wish that I could get this to say 4 plus 3.5 over 4. That's really what I want this display like. So what I could do is I could just hide that sucker, and then I could add the symbols that I need manually. When I say manually, I mean I can bring up, press Z to bring up the symbols palette, and then I can search for time, and then there are all these things, and I can say for, I think I have to attach these things to specific things to get to really lay out correctly. See how that's really attached to the note at the beginning there, but that's okay. 4 plus 3. Is there a point? That plus sign is entirely too big, right? So let me get rid of that thing and use this smaller plus sign. And then 4 plus 3. And is there a half? Is there a point in this particular part of the palette? No, but there is a half, so I'm just going to go with that. 4 plus 3 and a half over 4. So when I do that, I can get it to look pretty good. It looks good, but if the time signature ever changed or repeated, you know, like normally you only show the time signature at the beginning of a score, right? You only show it at the beginning. So this isn't a real time signature. It's just a bunch of symbols. If I ever did need to repeat the time signature later on in the score, I would have to do all this again manually, which doesn't thrill me. Now, if I brought up the inspector, I could probably get all of these things positioned perfectly. So like this thing should probably be exactly 1. In fact, all of these symbols here, if I select them all, should be exactly 1 space. There we go. And this guy should be exactly 3, I'm thinking. So, and then these guys I can position just with double click and arrow. If I was concerned that this wasn't really enough space allocated, I could totally what am I saying? I could what I could do is just go back to that time signature, the real time signature there, and change its properties so that the text was longer than just 8 plus 7, but something that would actually take up the same amount of space as this. Or I could go to that time signature and just say I want a little more trailing space. See how it's adding space there? So I could do that. There's a number of things I could do to fix the spacing. I guess I could do the same arrangement of symbols. Yeah, margin. So have a peek. Let me take a look at this picture that you've just given me here, because I'm curious. I was wrapped up in what I was doing. So yeah, that display of making this appear like an eighth note, that's a clever thing. So this is what someone has suggested, is that instead of having this showing up as a quarter note before the bar line, make it appear as an eighth note tied to an eighth note. That's pretty darn clever, right? So did you do that just by hiding the 16th note flag and adding an eighth note flag manually? Or did you somehow like redo the math on it so that it worked out that way? I feel like if you redid the math on it, it wouldn't play back correctly anymore. So I'm sort of thinking that was likely a let's see. I lost my train of thought. I feel like the better way to do it would be to hide the 16th note flags and then add an 8th note flag as a symbol and just sort of fudge it to look right. Is that how you did that, is my question. Now let me read back what I said. Now the tie is broken. We can't see the bottom right corner of the screen because I have my face on top of it. Oh yeah, of course. Okay. Yeah, I should have scrolled up. Okay, so that was when I was down here. There's usually nothing going on here, but that's when I tried hitting the hook button. Okay, yeah, you're right. I was totally unaware. Okay, so I mocked it by moving the bar line for now. Oh, moving the bar line. Okay. I need to hide one of the flags. I don't know if you can hide just one flag on a 16th note, because I think they come as a pair. But so the thing that I'm now like thinking about 4 things at once. Let me come back to that thing that in a second. What I do want to show is I feel like I've now got a pretty good representation of what I want this time signature to look like. And if I were to take a snapshot of it, I'm now going to get a snapshot that includes the staff lines, which I don't really want. So what I'm going to do is select all. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to hide the staff lines. I'm going to go to staff properties and say invisible staff lines. I'm spending way longer on this than I really, need to perhaps, but is that capturing a tiny bit of the clef? Maybe. All right. I think I've got this. I'm going to take a little snapshot of it. I'm going to take this time signature, make it invisible, and now I'm going to paste in. Oh, I needed to, when I had this guy here, I had that, I don't remember if I pressed Control C. And I want to unselect everything so I don't end up with a blue 4. All right, Control C. Now I can go here, select this rest. Oops, get out of image capture mode, Control V. Ah, I was better off with the staff lines, right? Because it's not a transparent background. Now, in principle, if I choose transparent background, I get a transparent background. The reality is I don't get a transparent background. The reality is it doesn't work on Windows, at least. There's a bug. So if I go back to staff properties, go ahead and turn the staff lines back on. I'm going to get the staff lines in my screenshot, and then I'm just going to do my best to make them line up. So here I have to be careful of the scaling. I've got my graphic. I think I had at one point figured out that so I'm sorry, I'm not talking while I'm working. Right, so doing the sort of things that I'm doing here would in principle work. Why is that? Oh, I must have accidentally selected the rest and moved it. So let me click it and hit Control R. I see, this is relative to the position of the rest. So when I move the rest, it moved that too. So if I lined up everything perfectly, you could get that to work. The reality is I probably won't get it to line up perfectly. It's going to depend on the resolution of the screenshot, and I'm not at all convinced that this is going to look as seamless. Really what I should do is just reproduce the same thing of copying all those symbols onto here. That's what I should do. But anyhow, that's this is now just prettying up the beginning of this thing. Other ways I could probably go about it. These are now details of the appearance of things. Oh, by the way, the orderly appearance of things was another tune we recorded for this CD, but I think it didn't end up going on the CD. Or did it? The orderly appearance of things. Did we put it on the CD? No, I think it was like a bonus track that we recorded but didn't actually put on. Anyhow, yeah, so copy the symbols, copy them together with Control click. Is that going to work? Is it? I did think of that and then had this notion that it wasn't going to work, but maybe it does. Control click them all, copy. No dice. No, that did not work. If I copy them individually, I can do it individually. Some things it works to copy multiple items at once, and some things it just doesn't. And I guess that's one that doesn't. But look, it is at least preserving the horizontal, if not the vertical offset. So I can go here and, you know, given sufficient time, I guess it's just, I wonder why the same offset. Are these attached to something different? I'm not sure why the same offset didn't work, to be honest. Because this is, what is it attached to? It's attached to that, and this is attached to that. Okay, so they're showing up as being attached a little differently is the deal. But in any case, at least now, if I do the same thing here, what happens if I pick this guy and then attach it there? It's probably going to be relative to that position. Yeah, so really I should figure out a better way of attaching this, maybe create a rest in another voice, and a rest in another voice is probably the way to go about it. Anyhow, that's how I can create the look of the time signature that I said I really want. So I think on my own time, I'm going to just go through the grunt work of that. You don't need to see the pain of that because I've been on this more than long enough. So yeah, once this issue is fixed that says, you know, that we should be able to use some of these other characters, I won't need to do all this stuff. But because this is something that I've gotten this far on, I am going to finish, but I'm going to finish it on my time because I think you don't need me anymore. Is it still going? Looks like my video stopped. I don't know if I'm still going or not. But in any case, hope that this was interesting to some of you. It's definitely, like I said, scary time signatures that I'm dealing with here, and some manipulations that were non-obvious. But it was a good exercise for me to actually go through this, and hopefully people who are trying to do these things get some ideas of ways that you can go about it. So with that, I think I'm going to sign off. Before I do, I will, as always, need to just remind people that my online course, I, of course, well, I shouldn't say of course. I do talk about time signatures. I talk about a lot of these issues, but I don't go into nearly as much detail on the nuts and bolts of how to do something quite this complicated, but the basics of how to work all these dialogues and stuff is definitely in there. It's a great way of learning to use MuseScore is by signing up for my course. And right now I am totally spacing on the URL for the thing. That's not good. Well, I'll just put it in the chat in a second. Well, I need to do that while it's on. So give me a sec. And School Mastering MuseScore, I think it's like complete. So this is a page. That's it. So, anyhow, take my course. And scary time signatures for Halloween. Yep, that is the idea, Colleen. So, this basically concludes the lesson, and I hope you all found it useful. Next week, there's a chance that I will be talking about the MuseScore 3 Alpha, the second version of that, or maybe I'll find something else to be talking about. There we go with, here's the link then for the course. So anyhow, I will catch you next week, and hopefully we'll have something that's a little more manageable of a task. This was quite involved, but I had fun doing it. I hope you had fun watching. Thanks.